So, I was in this discussion about the state of our schools, and the person discussing with me about them said that all the teachers should be compelled to teach a certain curriculum and penalised if they don't stick to that curriculum. And I agreed in principle, but I was rather concerned with how this would be done. Speaking as a teacher, I know how teachers can subvert these processes, and I wanted to discuss now. Well, I wanted to discuss then, but didn't get the chance, what the problems are, and then try and find ways of getting around them. And I can draw from my example, well, two things: Margaret Thatcher and the miners, and post-war Germany. You see, post-war Germany had a big problem with its schools because all the teachers were Nazis. Obviously, the Nazi Party had made sure that Nazis were in place in the schools. By the mid-30s, by 1945, there was a solid area of German education which was completely Nazified. The non-Nazis had been pushed out. All the Jews had been pushed out. And there were a lot of them in the academic world in Germany at the time. So there was this problem. Well, were they going to sack all the teachers? They couldn't do that. So what they did in the end was take the 30s and the 40s completely off the curriculum. Teachers were given a curriculum by the Americans, but it completely omitted German history from about 1931 onwards until the end of the Second World War. And maybe even a year or so after that, I'm not sure. The point is, they completely wiped a section out of German history because they couldn't do without the teachers. Now, you can't do without teachers for two reasons. First of all, the next generation has to be educated. And secondly, the parents have to be out at work. In Germany in the late 40s, everybody was working to try and set the German economy back on track. And they had to make sure that the parents could get out to work. And they could only do that if there was a sort of babysitting service for the kids, apart from the fact that the children needed to know how to read and write. So that's the first thing. You have a whole lot of the curriculum just wiped clean. And then you set a specific curriculum which the teachers don't deviate from. The only difference, and I say only, the difference between those German teachers and any teachers you might have in the United Kingdom now are, I had the wrong microphone on. So I'm switching the Yeti on now. And we'll see if, tell me if that's improved the sound any. German teachers followed orders. It's absolutely true. The stereotype of Germans sticking to the rules is a stereotype, but it has some validity. So when the German teachers were given a curriculum to teach, they taught it. Teachers here in the United Kingdom would not behave in that way. And the second thing we've got to remember about teachers is that we need them and they know it. Now let's get on to Margaret Thatcher. When she decided to have a run-in with the miners, she first prepared herself by stockpiling coal, secretly or semi-secretly. So when the miners did go on strike, there was enough coal to keep people warm. I think probably there was a lot of hairy moments because the strike must have gone on for longer than she'd calculated. However, the fact is there wasn't mass freezing in the country, which was what the miners had relied on as their battle cry before that. Now, I'm not arguing one way or the other, although somebody did make a comment about his father, who was a miner and whose body had been terribly damaged by the work he'd done. And although he was a obviously brave and obviously honest man, no reasonable parent would want their son to suffer the same sort of damage. And although he'd been done out of a job, I think the person who wrote to me about his father, who was writing in an extremely well-constructed way, I know this sounds... you know what I'm going to say, don't you? That you have Margaret Thatcher to thank for that. That you're some sort of a pen pusher and you're not down a mine with a lamp in your hat and coal dust in your lungs. And I know it was a terrible time. I'm not minimising that. But anyway, let's get on with the main thing. She stockpiled the coal. Now, you can't stockpile teachers. And that's the problem. More women work outside the home than inside. In previous years, the teachers didn't have as much power as they had because the little woman was always home. It was irritating for her to have to look after her children all day, but she could do it. Now it's not possible. And the teachers' unions know that. Now, years and years ago, I was at a TUC conference because, strangely enough, I was a union woman. And I was listening to a speech in which a representative of the NUT, the National Teachers Union, National Union of Teachers, said she had a way to solve all the economic problems of the country. And then she said, tax the rich. That's the answer. And I was absolutely appalled. This woman was a teacher. Well, possibly she wasn't actually teaching anymore, but she would have been reflecting the views of many of her colleagues in saying that. And they would be teaching children. In a free country, if you tax the rich, you can only tax them so much before they move away. The only way you can stop rich people from leaving an overtaxed country is by demanding exit visas and keeping them in the country. That's what, of course, various countries of the Soviet Union did. So it was a stupid thing to say, but she thought that was the answer. And that was years ago, and I'm quite sure there would be many more like her now than there had been then. And they have the country over a barrel. People need to send their kids off to some sort of daycare, and frequently they don't really pay much attention to what those children are learning. They just want them in a safe place where they, not roaming the streets so that the parents can go out to work. Now, this is a serious problem. You can't send police in to arrest teachers in classrooms. You can tell teachers to teach Shakespeare, but half of them don't know any Shakespeare, so how can they teach it? You can tell them to teach a form of British history of which you approve, but getting the machinery up for a curriculum in which you have actually come up with something of which you approve is an enormous job and will result in a lot of arguments. I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm just saying it's a huge job all on its own. You see, there are many complexities. I'm not saying they're unsurmountable. What I am saying is that when a radical government gets in and wants to change everything all at once, it's just not possible. How can you police the universities and the schools? Now, it's very interesting. Actually, this afternoon, this morning, I was thinking about that subject that had come up in one of my previous videos. And then I happened to be watching a Triggernometry episode in which Rod Liddle was saying exactly the same thing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to find that clip and I'm going to play it.
But I think it's far harder. I mean, it would be more interesting to deal with the teachers as well. Because it's another area where, again, there is heading towards close to unanimity of opinion. And I spoke to a lad who, quoted in the book, who voted leave, and he was a teacher at a school in London. And the hatred he got from colleagues, just incomprehensible hatred. How the fuck do you attack that? How do you stop that? There was a headmaster of a school in Dulwich who said that if any pupil in his school said anything similar to what Donald Trump had been saying about immigration, they would be expelled, excluded. I mean, this is mad, And I don't know what you do about that. I mean, close down the fucking teacher training colleges. What the fuck do they learn there?
Oh, the screen's gone again. So I'm not the only one talking about this. And what he was talking about was how the schools have deteriorated and are becoming places of Marxist indoctrination or racist indoctrination or whatever. But how you fix it, that's another matter. There has to be some imaginative strategies put in place. Because I just played another video. I'll put that up as well, in which a guy had recorded his professor, and the professor was saying that outer space was a construction of whiteness.
The space is not real. It's not real. Science, technology, it's all fake. It's a projection of white fantasies that has worked to control our interpretation of how the world works. None of us have had the privilege of going to fucking space to verify that there's these stars and these galaxies and these planets and things like that. Does that make sense?
Now, you see, we could start talking about white people, black people. What I talk about is bigoted people from either end. And I'm not going to get into that right now. I'm just talking about education. And the point is, you can't police all the teachers all the time. And you can't arrest teachers for not teaching exactly the curriculum. It's just like now the police are arresting people for making bad jokes or jokes they disapprove of. It's the same sort of thing. You end up really with a police state. There has to be another way. I can't give an answer. I'm just saying there has to be another way. One of the ways, but this is very long term, is to change the teaching in the training colleges. It's also this idea of university for all is a bad one. Not everybody should be at university. There are a lot of people who put themselves into almost lifetimes of debt going to university. Two of my kids went to university and one of them didn't. And I have to say that I wanted that other one to go to university because as a university person myself, I felt it was necessary. But later on, I realised it wasn't. So we have to find ways of having young people out of university. And we have to find ways of changing the practices of the colleges. As for finding ways of stopping the existing teachers, well, I'll leave that up to you to make suggestions. But it's not as simple as it sounds, that's for sure. If you want to donate or contact, the information will be rolling over the Graniopteryx as I speak. Please like, subscribe and share because it does help with the algorithm. If you visit my channel on YouTube and one day discover that I've disappeared without warning, you'll still find me on Bitchute or Minds. Just go to either of those platforms and do a search for Graniopteryx. If you're already watching this on Bitchute or Minds, good for you. Meanwhile, if you're watching this on YouTube, remember that you must keep checking the subscribe and bell icons because occasionally they reset. Till next time.